We will still have a brief introduction at the beginning about just what is blockchain technology. That's what our first meetup was on, which was way back in October, where we just talked about what blockchain technology is, how it works. We won't be covering all of that, but we'll be covering a little bit of it. We also, I believe, have Spicy Ranch from Cosmos Pizza this time. Nah, I have a lot of time. So the scope of just today's discussion, we're going to talk about what is blockchain technology and its use cases, and then what is money, and then on a much more existential level, what is truth? What does that mean? So blockchain is a bookkeeping technology at its core. And so the history of bookkeeping, basically, a long time ago we had bartering, but it had some granularity problems, as in like if you wanted to buy anything smaller than a cow, you couldn't really break that cow up into smaller parts, and it was just inconvenient. And then we moved on to early currencies, an abstract store of value, but it was small, portable, and convenient. It was a big step up from directly trading livestock with one another. As early as 300 BCE, we have loans and basic documentation like that. Then, coming around 1700 Common Era, we have stuff like modern banking, which have credit, business loans, fractional reserve banking, which is the system we use now to introduce new money into the supply. We start to see the advent of internet-based banking and standardized cross-bank ledgers, as in wire transfers and systems like ACH. But there are some problems with modern banking. It's extremely robust and secure, but it does have its disadvantages. Trusted middlemen is required. It has potentially high or unfair fees. And at the end of the day, there's a lack of full control over one's own money. And a potential solution for that is blockchain technology, which at its heart is a distributed ledger stored on a peer-to-peer network of computers. And it consists of a growing list or chain of timestamp records, which are known as blocks, and public key cryptography and hash functions work to secure the network, enforcing immutability and validation, which just says because of the math behind it, the data is guaranteed not to change and is guaranteed to be valid. And a distributed system is essentially a network of computers where they're all equal and all have a complete copy of all the information required to vet everything for themselves. But the golden question is, what is it good for? And a lot we don't know yet. It's still a relatively young technology, seeing its first working implementation in 2009. But there's a lot of things people have said about it. Ben Jones, which was the founder of Bitwala, a service that provides a Bitcoin debit card, said that crypto and the real world were an unholy marriage. And Al Gore said that I think the fact that within the Bitcoin universe an algorithm replaces the functions of the government is actually pretty cool. I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. So the original use case is cryptocurrencies, which you've probably heard of. And these basically consist of a store of value system, a ledger, for people to send units of currency around that have some sort of value which can be exchanged. And that need, that use case, spawned the initial technology. But the problems that solved was stuff like the double spending problem. Originally, in about 2008 or possibly earlier, there was something called the Liberty Dollar. Does anyone remember the Liberty Dollar? You remember the Liberty Dollar. The Liberty Dollar basically was these group of people set out to create an alternative to the dollar that was fair. And they printed their own money, which had a striking resemblance to United States dollars, and created an entire online banking system that mirrored the traditional banking system. And they ended up going to jail, I think, for replicating for this fraud. It was currency fraud because they were creating something that could reasonably be confused with a traditional dollar. And so if you try to do that without paper, it's hard to replicate, which is what the Liberty Dollar did. Information on a computer can be easily replicated, and so therefore any digital dollar can be copied and pasted very little effort, and therefore it has little value. And so blockchain technology solved that problem by introducing digital scarcity. And then we also have the trust problem, which is in order to keep track of account balances, you need some sort of central authority, and now no central authority is needed to keep track. And I think the most important one out of these two, rather than focusing on like the monetary innovation, was the solution to the trust problem. Because now you could have distributed ledgers of information and you wouldn't have to trust any single authority. And so what can be done on a blockchain? We have storage of transaction records, we have tracking of digital assets, we have prediction markets, proof-of betting, and it's a fully autonomous notary, which will have public records such as business licenses, trademarks, and copyrights. In addition, we have stuff like arbitrary data storage, which has it's basically Dropbox on a blockchain, and you have cryptographic assurance that your data will never be lost. In addition, it's an open market, which allows people to sell their hard drive space, and it has very low costs. So out of curiosity, have you guys experimented with any like cryptocurrencies or various blockchain use cases that you thought were particularly cool?
I did one in Shanghai a few months ago. We were trying to implement like a sort of a distributed AI algorithm atop blockchain technology. The idea was to do sort of like a FOSS thing with it. There's some challenges, but conceptually it was pretty cool, where you could basically source out code and rather than have to deal with it was designed to develop AI and math that could be movably authenticated against an audit trail, so you know this is the person that developed it at this time, so sort of like a global replacement for, say, patenting different ideas. Anyway, still in the trial phase, but I thought that was pretty cool. That's at least a conception of what we were working on.
Cool. Does anyone have any like questions or stuff you want to talk about? We can just do a quick discussion.
It's still pretty like trial with all these companies that's doing it, but I haven't tried it yet. Is it being offered as a service?
Yeah, actually, like if you, a few of these, particularly Filecoin, actually all five of these, with varying degrees of ease of use, these are all functional solutions to the file storage markets. You do have to purchase their associated cryptocurrency, which you pay for the storage in, and sometimes, depending on the network conditions, it can either be very, very, very astronomically cheap compared to traditional cloud storage solutions, or it can be more expensive. And so they're really interesting use cases, and I think the most mature by far right now is IPFS, because it's through IPFS. That's what I'm going. So another interesting use case is the entire government of Dubai. And so by 2020, according to Forbes, the Emirate wants all visa applications, all government-related bill payments, and license renewals, which account for over 100 million documents each year, to be transacted digitally using blockchain. And this is a legitimate use case because the information is as public, it's intended to be public, and it also ensures that data is not tampered with after the fact, which can lead to double bookkeeping. And so, do you think like increased transparency is inherently valuable? Like, have you ever like looked into public records, or do you think it's sort of just like a nice thing to have? Do you think the idea of transparency is better, or have you guys actually taken advantage of anything in transparency?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most bills are transparent and public, so there you go. It's one major use case of it, as well as actually just laws in general.
But is it necessarily better like this?
No.
Yeah. There's also, as someone mentioned, there's a lot of times when there's a lot of amazing use cases, and there's also a lot of times when blockchain ends up just being a watch for an inferior solution. But with stuff like public information, public records, file storage, it's an amazing use case that lets people do a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I'm just curious, so how, using that technology, how do you guys trace back to the person? Right, so you trace back to make an IP address, but I don't understand, like, if you have a visa application, and I'm Joe Schmo, how do we know that that's linked to Joe Schmo?
Joe Schmo, well, it's primarily because Joe Schmo's name is on it. But like what we were talking, what I was about to actually get to is like public key and like identity tracking. Like, have you ever used like PGP email encryption? Actually, let me go back to your back. Like, because PGP, like you have your public key, which is public information, but then usually like a university hosts a key server, and that's where you get it from. But then Joe Schmo, instead of uploading it to like, let's say, a Stanford key server, he could upload it to a blockchain-based distributed key ledger. And then Joe Schmo's identity and Joe Schmo's signature are all stored there instead of relying on that server.
Can't be revoked by the central authority like the university.
Yeah, exactly. If the university servers go down, or the university gets subpoenaed, it doesn't get affected.
I'm a little bit confused about what actually gets to the blockchain. So if I have some information that says my name or like something I wrote, like a memo, and I publish it to the blockchain, my understanding is that on the blockchain is just a hash.
Yeah.
But then if you looked at it, you wouldn't see my name, you would see a hash, right?
Or you can store the entirety of the data.
You can't.
Yeah. So like so like for example, Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's blocks only contain like block hashes and hashes of public keys, which are the addresses. But Ethereum, for example, contains that data in addition to arbitrary data. And the whole arbitrary data lets you really store anything on it. And I think that's what makes a lot of the more modern use cases possible. Because with the original Bitcoin implementation, miners got 80 bytes of space that they could put arbitrary information in the block. And there used to be a controversy in the Bitcoin community. Compared to the controversies in crypto now, it was nothing. But there was a guy named Luke Jr. who ran a mining group. And he was inserting like Catholic prayers in Latin into his blocks. And a lot of people who were either not Catholic or just didn't like the idea of that got pretty mad at him. But it was quite expensive, and basically he had to use all of his block space just for these Catholic prayers. So he wasn't voting on proposals, he wasn't doing anything of that. And 80 bytes is not a lot of space. But now with solutions like Ethereum or IPFS or Storage, people can store as many Catholic prayers on the block system as they want. But yeah, instead, a lot of certain blockchain technologies, rather than just having hashes of information or hashes of transactions, they actually store arbitrary data, which is simply less than time.
But how do you solve that size issue? Right? You can put anything there, pictures, music, and video, and all data gets really big, bigger. And the scaling is this distributed system, so it needs to be copied all in the distributed system. So.
And there are a variety, here I'll go back to this. There's a variety of solutions, and like, thanks for bringing that up, because scaling problems are a very big issue. Like Bitcoin's having growing pains, Ethereum's having growing pains, pretty much every cryptocurrency is having growing pains. And there's a lot of different solutions. Some include just removing data, such as which was what the segregated witness protocol for Bitcoin was, and separating the signature data from the transaction data. But a more popular one is just splitting into more networks. So like Filecoin, rather than storing one big chain that contains everything, it will use either side chains or just tell certain nodes to only store certain content. And so it sort of shards the content across different sub-networks so that no one network goes prohibitively much.
Yeah, basically at this point, blockchains are going to have to parallelize. They're going to have, side blockchains that are on the side, maybe voluntarily hosted, and not have all of the data hosted on the single most secure chain. And that's basically how they're going to slowly build out blockchains instead of build them to be able to store more data. They're just going to have to build them out.
And so, as we were talking about with identities, Another potential is email encryption or identity. So there's a classic privacy software known as PGP or GPG, which stand for privacy, pretty good privacy or premium privacy guard, respectively, which allows you to encrypt your emails among other things. However, the public keys need to be public, and so that means they need to be stored somewhere so that they can be retrieved. Traditionally, universities host key servers because they have the resources to do so and are often very widely trusted, but they're often susceptible to downtime or attacks. And so blockchains are the perfect place to store public record information, such as keys, because it doesn't have downtime or risk of data modification by a malicious party. Unless a blockchain application is designed to accept subpoenas, it can't be subpoenaed. And so all of your public contact information or associated encryption keys can be stored there. Another use. I don't know why that happened. Sorry about that. Oh, that's it. There we go. Hey. So another use case would be the DNS system. So when I was looking for clip art to use to illustrate DNS, which is the service that turns a domain name such as google.com into an IP address, which your computer can actually connect to, this was the most antiquated looking image I could find, and I chose to use it because it does represent how antiquated the DNS system really is. It's just very old technology. It's been around since darknet in the 80s. And it's antiquated and centralized. It's controlled by a single authority, known as the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Members, also known as the ANA. And it can suffer downtime, such as the catastrophic dying DNS attack from 2016, which took down Amazon, Spotify, Netflix, Etsy, GitHub, Spotify. It took down a fairly significant chunk of the internet just because those DNS servers were down. So when people went to the website, their computer didn't know how to connect to it. It's also very slow. Changes can take up to 24 hours to propagate in the entire DNS system because it has to go through IANA's bureaucracy, or ICANN bureaucracy. But blockchain-based DNS never goes down, can update within minutes, and can be significantly cheaper. And originally we had Namecoin, which was a standalone service that was based off of the Bitcoin code. And it basically allowed people to purchase domain names, and then people could use special software to update their DNS servers to resolve Namecoin domains. And more recently, we have the Ethereum name service, which runs on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And with a browser extension such as MetaMask, because everyone uses or heard of MetaMask, you can connect to these websites with no significant changes to the internal workings of your computer. And really just farming, manufacturing, and beyond. We have always on supply ledgers for manufacturing companies that are used. You can use it for court cases, intellectual property filings, government spendings, and really anything that needs extreme reliability and or transparency. Blockchains are that.
Is there an easy, short way to explain why it's not hackable?
Would you like me to do a really quick run through of my how blockchain works presentation from the first week up?
Well, if everyone else has already had that one,
I would appreciate that. Yeah, I can do that and make it quite quick. I respect for everyone's time. Let me pull that up. So, imagine it's October 27th.
Bitcoin's still on the way up.
It's like $2,000. You should buy Bitcoin. Why blockchain? Here's my bookkeeping thing. Problems with banks. So, Halloween's coming up. A blockchain is a distributed ledger stored on a peer-to-peer network of computers. It's a distributed system. The advantages of distribution include increased availability. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin never have downtime. They're hard to censor. For example, China's trying and failing to ban certain blockchain applications, and there's no middleman, which results in reduced fees. So to answer your unhackable question, a blockchain consists of a growing list or a chain of time-stamped and chronological records known as blocks, and their order is very important. So let's go through the life cycle of a transaction. Let's say on our example blockchain, let's just say it's Bitcoin. Or let's say it's Bitcoin in 2011, because these numbers would be very high today. So let's say the distributed ledger, which everyone has a copy of and everyone agrees on. Alice has 10 coins and Bob has 3 coins. And those are, Alice and Bob are very standard conventions of the crypto community to just be 2 arbitrary parties. Alice broadcasts the transaction to them. Everyone hears Alice. She says, I, Alice, am signing 4 coins to Bob. She signs it with an unforgeable signature, unless someone steals from you. And then the distributed network verifies the transaction's validity by ensuring it actually came from Alice, checking her signature, and that Alice has the appropriate balance. And the entire network can agree on this, and then if they agree on it, they pass it along. Then Bob, as a member of the distributed network, is now aware of his pending increased balance, because like every other member of the network, Bob heard what Alice said, which was that she was sending 4 coins to Bob. And so Bob hears Bob's balance of 3 coins is increased by 4. Then the distributed network finalizes the transaction by including Bob's balance is now 7 coins. So in terms of verifying the transaction actually came from Alice, it's done through something called the digital signature, which is part of a larger branch of technology called cryptography, which consists of 2 things, public key and private key. As we talked about with email servers, the public key needs to actually be public. In Bitcoin, the public key is actually inherent in the address. So when someone sends money to your address, you're able to spend it using your private key because the address is a shortened form, a hash of your phone. So the digital signature is essentially transaction. Alice sends 4 coins to Bob. It has a unique timestamp, and then she combines it with her private key using signature algorithm, and then it results in a unique signature that can never be reused that now validates that she was the one who decided to send 4 coins to Bob. And now it's finalized. So a big part of crypto is a cryptographic hash, which essentially is a fixed length it's a fixed length number or piece of data that represents the data in compact form. And it's used every day for file validation whenever you download a file from the internet. Even if you have a big file, such as a 20 gigabyte file, or a nearly identical big file, even if it's off by a bit, hash algorithms such as SHA-256 have a cascading effect where a very minute change in the file can result in very large changes in the hash, even though the files are nearly identical, which lets you tell very quickly if the files are tampered with in any way. And even a tiny file would have a similarly length hash to a massive one. And so back to the unhackability of blockchain. Of course, there are no system is perfect. If you have extreme amounts of processing power in the case of Bitcoin, or you somehow manage to compromise it due to a flaw in its programming, every system can be compromised. But blockchains are particularly difficult to compromise because of this unique state. So basically, since all the information is public, all the information is then contained in these blocks, which links to the previous block using its block hash. And the block hash represents all of the transaction data and represents that all the transaction data has not been modified or tampered with in any way. And so since this block links to this block, and this block links to this block, every single time a new block is added, it reinforces the data in the previous blocks by linkage. And so the longer the blockchain goes, the more secure older transactions get. So for example, in Bitcoin, a transaction is only secure after it has its including in a block, and it has 5 blocks in front of it, which is known as 6 confirmations. And since each block links to the previous, essentially every single new block is another person sort of repping for saying, hey, I trust this guy's good. And so that's why as it grows, it gets worse. So just as a very short little recap, a transaction is created, the transaction is signed, the transaction is pushed to the network validates the signature, the transaction validates the block, and then it's in terms of consensus algorithms, we can skip past that. There's proof of work, which is are you guys familiar with the process of Bitcoin mining? So basically how that works is how we talked with the hash functions earlier in the cascading, right? A very, very small change in the data of a block or the data of any file can result in a massively changed hash. And so something is appended to the block data by a miner known as a nonce. And based on what the nonce is, it can drastically change the value of the hash. And so how Bitcoin mining works is the miners increment the nonce until they find a hash that's considered significantly lower. So all the hashes are is a number in hexadecimal notation of a fixed length. And so since this one is padded by zeros in the beginning, it means only this part is the number. And so it's a significantly smaller number than this one. And the nonces can get into the hundreds of trillions depending on the difficulty. And it's just a small part of the block that changes the hash. And so under the hood, that's all Bitcoin mining is it's just people adding a little bit of data to the end of the block until the block has a very special hash. And then that can be very quickly and easily validated by any member of the network without repeating the work of the trial and error of going through every single box.
That's how the chain gets security. But in terms of the numbers behind the addresses as well, the numbers, some of the size of these numbers behind the addresses are on the order of the amount of atoms in the observable universe. And so it's not that these systems are unhackable, it's that it's computationally infeasible to do so, and you would need all the computers in the world, plus an amount of energy that would take until the heat death of the universe to break this. So it's not that it's unhackable, it's that it's extremely infeasible.
A question about processing time, like I use Amazon Prime and I watch movies. So I'm like, I want to stream a movie, I buy a movie, it hits my credit card, I know that my credit card's there, and then it's like, bang, you have access to this movie, you can stream it now. So if I switch over to Bitcoin and I do that same transaction, does it just get back to me and say, we're processing this transaction for 10 minutes, and we have to get 6 confirmations, we'll email you in 10 minutes? And how is that an improvement over hitting my credit card and I get to instantly watch the movie?
It isn't at all. You're 100% right. And so there's a lot of scaling solutions to the sort of confirmation time problems of Bitcoin. One of the most popular ones is the quote Lightning Network, which essentially allows for transactions to be confirmed off the blockchain. But even if you wanted to stay on the blockchain, it depends on the level of security. So the 6 confirmation thing with Bitcoin, right? It is the maximum number of security. Like what he was talking about, the heat death of the universe. The 6 confirmations gives you the heat death of the universe style security. Like that transaction is not getting close. But if you're just watching a movie, sometimes you don't need any confirmation and can rely on instant network confirmation. So going back to this diagram, where the network says, looks good to me. What that does is, if a network is invalid, let's say they don't have sufficient coins or don't have, they don't have a valid signature, if anything's wrong with it, it doesn't get propagated, which means a node or a member of the network that has that transaction information, it doesn't pass it along to the other computer that's connected. Which means that if you can get the overwhelming majority of the network to agree with the transaction, there's a very, very good chance that transaction path is valid and will go through when it's included in the block. And so if you were just purchasing a movie, for example, since that's a small transaction, movie rental costs like anywhere from $3 to $3, this would be good enough for that. Or alternatively, you could use another cryptocurrency that focuses on fast confirmation times as one of its key features. But in terms of like confirmation times, for smaller transactions, and you don't need that definitely universal level security, this just sort of thumbs up from the network is usually good.
But then need to reconcile this sometimes, right? Even though you don't go through full confirmation process, right? But however, for the correctness and integrity of the whole blockchain, somehow someone need to resolve that they need to be recorded.
You're talking about the Lightning Network?
Is it done at the backend side or how? Yeah, the
Lightning Network does when you make a Bitcoin transaction to open your channel, and then when you're ready to collect all of the resolve all the transactions, you close your channel. And so for example, if you were Starbucks or something, you could open your payment channel at the beginning of the day, and that's only one transaction on the Bitcoin network. And then at the end of the day, you close the channel. So instead of having to make several expensive transactions on the Bitcoin network, you only make two, and then intermittently, all the transactions were between you and that party bidirectionally. Straight from me to you.
Accumulated.
Right, exactly. And then you resolve it. You could resolve it at the end of the day or the end of the month.
Will be
And then you are publishing to the Bitcoin blockchain at the end. Yes.
So in the end, everything eventually gets set up on a permanent finalized blockchain. So even if this is good for a movie transaction or you're using something in the Lightning Network, eventually it always, or at least for Bitcoin, it always ends up on a blockchain. So there's alternative consensus methods to proof of work-based mining, and one of the most popular ones is proof of stake, which is basically mining, but instead of mining with expensive computers, you just mine with the wealth itself directly. You can just watch your transactions, gather the transaction into a block, just like a miner, enter a lottery system with your win chance based on your total amount of coins held, and if you win, you then sign and broadcast the block to the network, and then collect the reward of accepting that network, which is more eco-friendly, but does pose a wealth distribution problem, as in the rich get richer, which sort of is what proof of work aimed to avoid. But now that 90% of all the Bitcoin hashing power is owned by a few Mongolian hash mines, obviously that's sort of gone away. But it's still secure, so it works. There's also delegated proof of stake, which is a lot like proof of stake, but rather than being based on your personal assets, it's the assets that are delegated to you by the community. And to summarize, a blockchain is a distributed public database. It's highly available, has very high integrity. It utilizes public key cryptography and digital signatures to make sure that all transactions are valid. The blocks are linked to one another by their hashes, and there's a variety of consensus algorithms such as the classic mining, which has been around since 2009, or proof of stake or delegated proof of stake, which has been around since about the 2013 time. And much more, there's a lot of blockchain use cases.
Just the reconcile real quick.
Yeah.
What do you, because there's some inherent problems like you talked about, like I was with some of the Chinese that have like 25% of it. They know all the guy, like it's all out of Zhengzhou, Shenzhen and whatnot. Like they even know with all the Chinese stuff, like the regulatory stuff, they just are now buying stuff in this country and in Iceland and whatnot. But there's still, like I said, there's still centralized control of a very big distributed system. Where do you see the notion of distributed consensus going in 2 years or 5 years from now? Does these like you were sort of touching on the fact that every one of these has problems that we can describe algorithmically, mathematically, whatnot, better than maybe we had before. Where do you think it's headed?
Well, so this is just my opinion, but mining, in my opinion, is awful, and I don't think it will
That's rubbish. I mean, I was like, where do you really think it's going? Because that's obviously a losing proposition on so many levels.
So I think people are going to go for a more environmentalist approach. I think proof of stake or some derivative of it will definitely be the future. We might even move away from the block model altogether. Some cryptocurrencies, there's one known as Roblox, which recently rebranded to call itself Nano. It uses something called a DAG, which is called its directed acyclic graph, which is an alternative method of storing distributed ledger that's an alternative to the blockchain. And rather than having a proof of stake or a traditional delegated proof of stake system, they just have these notarizers which are voted on by the community, and they have no reward, but as every single node, every single participant in the network participates in the voting process to determine what is valid. And I think in terms of the one that's the most resistant to bad faith actors, where mining will always have its place probably, but I think the future will certainly be delegated for some reason.
Where does that go? Like you mine you're at 51, and then if you go to like stage, you're like there's like you don't the ability to manipulate goes down dramatically. I can't remember what the factors, but I think it's like 4 times more difficult to manipulate like the entirety of the network. But what about what is the manipulatability of a delegated proof of stake model, or at least what you are like the distributed cyclical graph? Like what would that be?
So for that,
Or how would one maliciously manipulate?
So it depends on the model. For most of them, such as like Roblox or delegated proof of stake, it requires just an obscene amount of capital. So rather than controlling 51% of the total computing power of the network, you could just control like 70% of all of the currency, which is very, very difficult to do. And so the attack vector is certainly a lot more expensive. But even with like proof of work, the 51% attack, it isn't just 51%. It's 51% plus quite a bit of luck. So like the more you have, the less lucky you need to be. But with systems like proof of stake, there's a lot less luck involved. And so an attacker can be seen, like if something's a massive amount of wealth, or there's some problem in the code that's allowing the system to be exploited. It's a lot more flexible.
The thing with the delegated proof of stake and really proof of stake in general, though, is that in order to have any power to attack the system, you essentially have to commit financial suicide. Because in order to have any say in the system, you have to have the token. So if you want to destroy a system that you just bought currency from the market for to destroy, you're basically committing financial suicide. And then, because blockchain is so versatile, the group who you just try to marginalize can just fork and just exclude you from the network if you try to become some sort of power actor. That's the interesting thing about blockchain, is it always has an exit.
Wait, that for distributed cyclical graph, that's not. You're talking about for delegated
proof of stake,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so the creator of Bitcoin actually once said something about the attackability of blockchain networks. He said, I want it to be much more profitable to play by the rules than to attack it. And I think that quote is really held up because you can design systems through various incentive models or cutting edge technology, but all that's really important in the end is that it's more rewarding to play by the rules than to attack it. And then if you have any very big, dangerous bad faith actors, like for example, Chinese miners, it's much more profitable for them to just play by those rules and amass wealth than to attack it and destroy its value. And so I think it ultimately just boils down to making sure it's better to play by the rules than to attack it.
Carefully balanced incentives. It's not. There isn't any perfect system that's going to dictate behavior entirely.
I hope that answers my question, but obviously.
Well, this is more we're talking about proof of stake. There, like the DAG I heard about, sort of a white paper out of I think it was CMU that discussed like how you could sort of virtualize an aggregate model where you could get 72%. What is it? Well, like you have to get a certain percentage of control virtual currency, and there was a way to approach doing that theoretically without actually having to get control of the currency. If you could like related to some type of hierarchy model where people could, sort of assign their currency temporarily for purpose of participating as part of a bad faith maneuver. So that you're basically saying, okay, we're going to screw over this 30% or whatever the smaller group is for some short period of time, which is kind of what the Chinese did a couple years ago. That was a dragon. It's listed on the ledger where they actually did this manipulation and made money. And one of the people that was part of it put something into the blockchain saying that this was going to happen. Nobody really believed it, and then a few months later it happened. It was like dragon fire. There's an annotation on the blockchain that describes what the Chinese did, and that's because these miners, which were working orthogonal to each other initially, colluded for a period of time so that they could make hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was, anyway, that's a side note. But the notion of a dagger, you plan to give a talk on this, I'd be very interested to go for you to go in deep on that topic.
I would certainly consider that. I am not an expert on that. I have sort of a very basic idea of how it works, but it's a very new system, and it hasn't fully been proven yet, but I think it's super new technologically, and removes a lot of the attack vectors, like you said, where people with the power create and results in something bad for a minority.
I've had trouble finding a lot of useful information on it.
I would recommend, there's two really good currencies that use the technology. There's Liblox, which is now called Nano, and there's Byteball, which also uses it. I am not very good at reading technical papers, but I read the Liblox white paper, and a lot of it is written in very nice language, and you might be able to get something from that.
What is Ryblock and what?
Byteballs.
Byteballs.
How do you spell that?
Which one?
Right, what?
Byteball. It's not a very boring.
Interestingly enough, actually, Lisk is the largest holder of the largest holder of byte balls.
Byteball?
Yeah, they had, because their ICO account. I'm gonna get into that a little bit, but yeah, the sponsor of this event is actually the largest holder of byte balls because it was a Bitcoin airdrop, where basically they gave it to all Bitcoin holders. All you had to do was redeem it based on your address, and so they happened to do an ICO during that time frame and collected free byte balls.
No problem. It's a neat technology because I'm big into environmentalism, and I used to think mining was super cool, and mathematics
I
is still.
despise the notion of useless computation so you can make harder, more difficult useless computation.
It's still cool.
You know what kind of AI and machine learning we do with those resources?
A lot.
That's all I'm interested in. I hate mining.
There was a really cool use case a few years ago that I was a big fan of called prime number. And so in prime numbers, there's something called a Cunningham chain, which sounds really weird, but it's actually pretty simple. Let's say you have a prime number and you double it and then subtract 1. Is that prime? And so there's certain numbers that are the start of something called a Cunningham chain, where basically you can take the number, double it, subtract 1, it's prime. Take that new prime, double it, subtract 1, it's still prime. Take that, double it, subtract it, it's still prime. And they don't really do a lot, but they're kind of neat. There was a currency created called prime, which replaced its proof of work from a hash-based method to one that found very large prime Cunningham chains, and they actually broke the world record for the world's largest Cunningham chain.
Continues to break its own records.
Yeah, I don't think it's, it has. I think it broke one in 2016. It hasn't since then.
Well, yeah, it was like 20 years ago that they developed a formulaic approach to determining which primes qualify for Cunningham chain. So yeah, I hadn't heard of prime, but so that's great that it's actually being incorporated.
There's a few like that. There's some that are analyzing the human genome. There's some that are analyzing some sort of cancer research data. There's CureCoin, I believe. There's a few that do other type of scientific calculations as well. They're like that's their particular purpose. That's definitely one of the most probably important use cases for us to get into is to help out academia and research and like you said, use the computational power that all these people are amassing together productively.
Like, has anyone ever heard of folding at home?
Yeah.
So like, people have often proposed, like, why can't we replace hash cache proof of work, which is big in Salvador, with folding? And so like, the whole crux of that issue is like, proof of work algorithms have to be very hard to do, but very, very, very quick to verify. So with like proof of work, if you have to do 100 trillion hashes to find the one, you know where the one is, and then everyone else can check it in one hash, which is very quick and easy.
Well, why not do something that actually has tangible value when you complete it? Of course.
Exactly. But
And this is fun.
if we did, let's say, protein folding for a block proof, and let's say it was a very difficult protein that required 14 hours on a very good computer up in the city. When we're done with that, we say, hey, this is the result of the protein folding. And now the network has to check it, but the network has to redo all of the work again to verify. And for that unfortunate reason, it's really, really hard to design like proof of work-based methods that actually do useful stuff. Because most useful stuff is hard to do, hard to validate. Well, proof of work algorithms, which are often meaningless, are hard to do quickly. And so it's all about that validation.
I've heard something where they were trying to come up with a clever way of validating completed folds, and I think it related to chirality, where you could basically ensure that even without doing the computation, you can ensure that a fold is properly valid, or that you could validate a fold without actually doing the computation. Now you may talk into that some more, but I know there's some research going on there, so it's conceivable that either that was one approach, and another approach I think people were taking was actually using visualization to do this, so that you could create a three-dimensional representation of an object or of a protein that had been properly validated, and then you could essentially compare that to another three-dimensional representation, and the data that would be contained would be the three-dimensional coordinates that represented that structure. But I don't know if that's gone anywhere past the proof of concept or that's a theoretical phase. But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned folding, because that would legitimately give us something of benefit rather than just burning cycles and energy.
But do you not think that being to escape oppression by the government, capital controls, all these different things is not some sort of value that we should have? We should not be able to exit if a government's oppressing us, to take our collective value elsewhere?
Well, I think that the
not good?
conceptual points you're raising are unequivocal. Well, I shouldn't say unequivocal. To me, unequivocally valuable. It's the methodology that I object to. I mean, I'm a vegan, so I also I hate the idea of energy being burned, and I know, since I'm dealing with some of these miners, I know how many hundreds of millions of dollars they are spending to invest in like ASICs that can do nothing, at least
Right.
currently, like you can't even repurpose these things. I was thinking,
Well,
maybe some cool ML on these, or what kind of...
Well, then here's another question.
It's hard for me to get behind that.
How much
even though I
electricity
think
do you
it's-
think every bank building in the world is using collectively? All those multi-story buildings all around the world, how much do you think that they're using?
Right, but you're
Is there now value in replacing
creating
that?
an argument against one, which I don't agree with that model either. I just think that there must be a better way, not to say, okay, we have to find this theoretically perfect solution or do nothing. I'm glad that we're at least on a path to transition to something better, but I really dislike this idea of getting no value, of at least tangible value. There is sort of societal benefit that we could derive from any of these solutions if they were properly implemented and adopted.
Yeah, I agree that obviously once we find a better solution that works better than proof of work, that we should be using that. But the innovation and the real breakthrough here is the trustlessness. The fact that everyone can store the ledger. If we can do that without having greater concerns with proof of stake or delegated proof of stake, then we should be doing that. Right now, we're just kind of in the industrial age of Bitcoin, so to speak. It's just a dirty, clunky phase. We're running on diesel instead of solar panels, like it's just a matter of time, I think.
What you said about that, because that really takes me back to like what my mom used to say, and I tried to explain it to her. She was like, so they're not actually doing anything? And I would be like, well, no, they're doing this group work, and she's like, but they're not actually doing anything.
10 minutes trying to explain some X, Y, so she said, so it's doing nothing. That was at the end of 10 minutes. I'm like, okay. So either I was way above her or I'm way below. Like, because her conclusion is kind of what I agree with. It's, yeah.
It's both. It's doing
yeah.
nothing and something.
It's really useful to do that.
Yeah.
There are some cool initiatives going on about like creating like, you know, enclosed ecosystem where you at least take the heat source back, use it to, you know, power, you know, farms that are creating, you know, the vegetative systems that maybe are pumping out. So, like, there's some things that people are talking about, but who knows?
So does anyone else have any?
Completely off topic of this conversation here. How does a consensus network deal with collisions? So say someone publishes a transaction and it's consensus from a certain percent of the network. And then it says, okay, I'm good, I'm stamping it, boom, done. But then another edge of the network is also publishing a completely different transaction and then a different percentage of the network, which they're connected but not fast enough to reach 100% consensus. And they stamp it, and then there's a few transactions there and a few here, and suddenly things percolate out to each other and things don't match up anymore.
Yes, explain ACID on distributed system.
Acid?
Atomistic systems, yes, sure. Like public database, that's all. That's the same problem we have with like Hadoop initially. Like they're trying to figure out how do you ensure consistent transactions aren't, you know, colliding each other, race conditions, that kind of stuff. You know?
So like, if you have conflicting transactions, which you often do, they're not entirely uncommon at all. Ultimately, it's up to the miner to decide what transaction gets put through and which gets thrown out. And if the miner chooses to accept both for some reason, then the whole rest of the network will reject that. So if there's a conflicting transaction, maybe some race condition, let's say two very geographically isolated nodes sent nearly identical transactions that would result in a double spend. And due to the geographic positions, it results in some sort of strength propagation, which results in disagreements within the network. That's not on the blockchain yet, and when it eventually does get committed to the blockchain, the miner who creates that block makes the final decision and ends the consensus break.
Does that still function the same way outside of the context of mining, just a financial transaction, let's say? So you have two entities that perform a whole wallet transaction of sorts. And part of the network does commit these transactions to the chain, but
The winning miner is the one who commits the transactions. The network doesn't commit the transactions, they just collect them together in a pool, waiting to be submitted by the next miner.
Can I add to that? And one thing that I understood from my reading is that in such cases you just brought up, that they also consider the value one, and then they say they go to the next one, so that as they progress, now that they start off from the very beginning step, and then the next one, the winner. And so there's the longest blockchain which is correct and answered, that gets selected. The first time you got the tie, right? Because of the geographical difference, is first, you both are accepted and move on, and then the next one, it's hard to have a consensus that both of them get the same kind of thing. So the next time, one get earlier finished earlier than the other one, and that gets accepted. And at one point, history of that blockchain, I was told that there were three actually blockchain. The second tie and third tie, they actually had tiebreak there. Finally get accepted. And then there was a bug. Actually, there was 7 of them having the same time and the equal the blockchain. So from the different location. So they got both accepted, but that one turns out to be bug there. So they stopped from that. I don't know.
So, if you don't mind,
Alright. Well, unless anyone has any other specific things to ask or talk about, we actually have one more little quick presentation.
maybe
Thank you for all your.
intermit for like maybe 5 minutes real quick,
Yeah, like
and then
5 minutes.
yeah, and then we'll do the other bit.
Pizza left, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we have an additional presentation on our sponsor list, and we'd like to ask the questions about that. We'll get started. Okay.
You really know a lot, you know a lot of stuff I don't actually.